stay tuned because for the next 60 minutes, Motorsports Unlimited is on the air. Hi, I'm Jerry Bryant, and these are the lovely ladies of motorsports. And we got the famous Bill Wildt, and we got all kinds of other good stuff.
Hi, I'm Dan Schmitt. You might be confused by the opening of this show because I mixed in Motorsports Unlimited opening and a little bit of the Team Chicago opening, because I've talked to a couple of the cable outlets that ran Bill Wildt's show, and I told them I would put together another 1 hour show I would put together another 1 hour show that would continue our conversations, because Bill Wildt was a very interesting person, no doubt about it. He was a good short track racer, and that's why I met Bill. I met Bill at Sycamore Speedway in 1970, and we've been friends for 52 years. So after he got injured racing motorcycles, he did come back and he did sign up with Team Chicago. I mean, he was in all my Team Chicago magazines and books. So but Bill eventually went and raced cars then for a while, but then he started the Motorsport Advancement Crusade, which is sort of like my Team Chicago thing. How do you get people to pay attention to motorcycle racing or racing? Bill's whole thing is the whole motorsports community is ignored by the media. So I'm going to, I should mention that Bill started the Advancement Crusade, then when the public access television thing came about, then he was one of the first ones to be a public access producer, I think in 1985. I didn't get into the end of 1986, and we came to it separately. We weren't really seeing each other too much at that time, and then I got into TV, and he got into TV, and we've intermixed. So these conversations, I thought Bill was a very interesting guy, that we should listen to these interviews, find out where he came from, what he did, how he got into racing, and started a TV show. It's all very interesting stuff. And then at the end, I'm gonna show you a clip from one of his shows. Pretty interesting, working with me, and from Grattan Raceway. This is a great clip.
Starting in 1995, one of the most important things that Bill Wildt did every year was go down to the Rock, the spot of the first automobile race in America, and he would produce 2 to 3 to 4 shows. He would interview anybody that showed up. He was one of the greatest promoters of motorsports.
The building you are looking at is the Museum of Science and Industry. But I would like you to use your imagination and pretend that this is 100 years ago. 100 years ago was 1895, because as we tape this, it's Thanksgiving Day 1995. And 100 years ago, the Museum of Science and Industry did not exist. Girls, come on in here. I want you to hear the story because this is particularly important. And I want to really, really thank these 3 girls. It is freezing cold today, and it is Thanksgiving Day. And that's what it was 100 years ago. And everybody had to make a lot of sacrifices in order to participate in the event that we're talking about today. The first thing I want to mention, though, is the building behind us. Museum of Science and Industry didn't exist until the mid-1920s, and yet in 1895, when America's first automobile race was held, it started right in front of this building. So here's a little test. Tammy, you're from Hawaii, so this is new for you. Tammy P., tell us what this building was.
I remember, so wait, let me think about it.
Pegster?
Was it convention center or something, or some kind of a center?
Go ahead, Tina.
What was it?
It was built for the World's Fair.
That's exactly right. This is a leftover building from the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, which was called the Columbian Exposition. Now, the Columbian Exposition in 1893, yes, Columbian Exposition in 1893 was a pretty important event for a number of reasons. Now, this was 2 years before the time that we're talking about, and what was important about it was that it marked the beginning of alternating current. If you'll remember a fellow named Nikola Tesla, who was a famous famous inventor and did most of the work involving alternating current, which if you don't know is what everybody uses everywhere in the world for powering your houses and all that. At the time, Thomas Edison was a big proponent of direct current, DC current. Tesla was for alternating current. I won't go through the whole war of the thing, but what finally decided which way the world was going to go as far as lighting their homes and providing electricity for America and for the whole world, what really decided it was the Columbian Exposition in 1893 in Chicago, or the Chicago World's Fair, because Westinghouse, which Tesla worked for Westinghouse, got the contract to provide the electricity, which means they went with AC power, which was a brave decision back then because this was all new technology. Nobody knew it was going to work. And the 1893 exposition was a huge success, and the lighting was absolutely brilliant, and it really proved the value of alternating current rather than direct current. I won't go into all that because this is Motorsports Unlimited, and that's not what our show is about. But I want to talk a little bit about the history of this building. This building in 1893 was lit by alternating current because it was part of the World's Fair in 1893. Something else was going on in 1893, and what that was that there was a newspaper in Chicago, and there was about a dozen newspapers at the time, but there was a newspaper called the Times Herald. Times Herald. And who was the publisher?
I can't remember.
Herman Kolstad was the publisher.
I knew it was with a C.
And in 1893, he took a trip to France. And in France, they had the first automobile race ever held in the world. And I believe it was Paris to Bordeaux, the first automobile race ever held in the world. And he was so impressed with how many cars, and by the way, the word cars didn't exist, the word automobile didn't exist. He was so impressed with how many horseless carriages there were that he was concerned that the United States was falling well behind. So he came back to this country, and he attended the World's Fair also. And in the World's Fair, there were only a couple of little, almost as an afterthought, devices representing the horseless carriages, and he thought America was getting way behind in this, so he wanted to use his newspaper, the Times Herald, in order to stimulate creativity in the automotive field. Or again, the automobile wasn't invented. In fact, part of what he did was he had a contest as part of this first automobile race to try to name these vehicles. And the name that won, I'll give it away because it didn't stick. Say it?
Motorcycles.
Right, Motocycles was the name that won the contest as what to call the horseless carriages. M-O-T-O-C-Y-C-L-E, motorcycle. That never really stuck. But what he did was he said, we are going to have an automobile race, and it's going to be from Milwaukee to Chicago. That didn't work out because they couldn't get all the governments involved because it was 2 states involved and lots of counties and all that. They couldn't get that, so he finally settled on it was going to be from Chicago, from right here to Waukegan and back. It was going to be, I believe, and some of this I might not be dead accurate, I believe it was supposed to be like November 2nd, 1895, and he had like 80 entries, but when the time actually came for the start of the race, there was only 2 people with running horseless carriages, so he wanted to postpone it for another, 26 days, whatever it was, to Thanksgiving Day. What, say again?
And they got mad and wanted to sue him.
Right, exactly. The 2 guys that were ready said, no, wait a minute, you said the race was going to be, this is for $5,000, this is from real money. You said the race was going to be on November 2nd, so you got to do it on November 2nd. Kolstad finally came to an agreement with these guys. We'll run a demonstration race, not a race, but an exhibition from here to Waukegan and back on November 2nd, and we'll run it'll give you extra money for that. So they went for that. So these 2 cars ran. It was a Duryea and a Mueller-Benz, and they went to Waukegan and back, and the Duryea got into an accident in Libertyville, ran into a hay wagon and didn't finish, and the Mueller-Benz won the demonstration.
Took him 7.5 hours?
No. You're mixing up with unfortunately, we don't have recorded times for that. That's how long it took. But you're getting it mixed up with the 7.5 mile an hour speed average for the eventual race.
That's right. He was going.
A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. She read a little about this last night. Okay. But in any event, this was very exciting times. So what happens? So he postpones, and you guys are freezing, right?
Nah. I'm freezing.
Well, you're from Hawaii. That's expected. poor Hawaiian girl here.
We've been here in Chicago all my life, so I'm used to it.
Okay, in any event, what was important, so they postponed this race. They said, okay, we're not going to have the race on the 2nd. We had that exhibition thing, and we'll postpone it to Thanksgiving Day, which was 26 days later, Thanksgiving Day, and we'll have many more entries. 3 days before Thanksgiving Day, 1895, they had a freak snowstorm with 60-mile-an-hour winds. The city was under snow. It looked like the city was impassable for this race, and so there was pressure on him to postpone postponed it again, but he was already kind of becoming the laughing stock. The other newspapers in town were making fun of him, saying these contraptions would never be anything, they'd never go anywhere, blah, 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 and all the rest of it. So he says that race is going to come off no matter what. We're going to do it on Thanksgiving Day. So as we stand here right now, it is just about exactly the time, 100 years ago today, the first automobile race ever held in America was held right here in Chicago, starting literally right here from this point. And it was an important event, and he had to shorten it because of the snow conditions. He shortened it from here to Evanston and back, a 54-mile route, starting right here, going up Michigan Avenue, and of course the outer drive wasn't there at the time, but I think it was a road called Park West or something. It went all the way up to Evanston, and then a different route on the way back went by the old Riverview Amusement Park, and then on out to Milwaukee Avenue and through Garfield Park and Douglas Park and all the rest of it. Point was, it really did establish a bunch of things. It established that the internal combustion engine, the gasoline burning internal combustion engine, was probably the way to go, because those were the only two cars that finished. Interestingly enough, 6 cars made it to the starting line. Lots of cars were stuck in snowdrifts in Indiana and in the middle of Illinois and on railroad cars trying to get to Chicago for this race. They couldn't get here because of the inclement weather conditions, but 6 cars actually started. A couple of them were electrics. They didn't go very far in the event. They went, I don't know, a few miles, and the heavy snow conditions used up their electricity very fast. A couple of cars crashed out, and one crashed out, one broke out, and the 2 cars that finished the event were the same 2 that did the demonstration to Waukegan and back, except it finished in reverse order. The guy that crashed in Libertyville actually ended up winning this thing, and it was really only by a few minutes, but it's an interest. We'll talk a little bit more because we got to get the girls warmed up. But what I wanted to do, I said 7 years ago, I did the first show about America's first automobile race, and what I was trying to do was I wanted to inspire some thinking out there. I think this celebration should have been a huge event in the city of Chicago. I wanted this to be the United States Grand Prix, a Formula One race over the original circuit of the first automobile race held in America, because 95% of the streets are still here, so it was doable, and I hoped for it to be a big celebration. And we did the first show about this 7 years ago. We did 2 shows about it last year, 1 year ago, hoping to stimulate some thinking, and I said to myself, well, if nothing else, 1995 Thanksgiving Day, if nothing else, I'm going to go down in front of the Museum of Science and Industry and just grouse about the fact that no big celebration occurred, because this is really an important day. And a couple of weeks ago, I got something in the mail that somebody has actually put a little celebration together. So I said, I'm going to go down there, and I'm going to talk about this first race, and if there's anybody around here to do anything, I'm going to show that to the audience too, so we can say that at Motorsports Unlimited, we participated in just a little bit of a piece of history. We were there, okay? So does that make any sense at all, what I'm saying? Okay, it does. So this is actually a very important event, and John, I don't know if you've got it in your camera shot. We've got John Kuchan on camera here today. I want to make sure that we can see the building behind us. We've got this, again, the architecture was just gorgeous on these structures, and hopefully, as I'm talking, I'm also putting in a picture of the start of the first race, which shows the building behind the cars, the 6 cars that actually made it to the start, and they're in the snow. So we're not quite in the snow, but it's plenty cold today.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that. I can't believe how spoiled we are. I mean, these guys went on those the first race 100 years ago, and they had no covering over the car or anything, and
no protection at all. As a matter of fact, people were pulled from the vehicles, suffering from exhaustion and exposure. It was very, very tough. The day was not unlike today. The temperature was about the same, although there was, of the 12 inches of snow that fell 3 days earlier, there was still some 6 to 8 inches, and some of it drifting still around, and the temperatures,
you can imagine.
It was absolutely, it was absolutely brutal.
There were no roads. I mean, it was dirt.
No. There were cobblestone streets for the horses.
Okay.
In any event, folks, I hope we're going to find some people celebrating this occasion. I hope it's not going to be us, but even if it is just us, we're going to have a good time anyhow. So we know how to. There you go. So if you guys would please tell the folks.
Don't go away, folks. We'll be right back.
As we look at the backside of the Museum of Science and Industry, the American Autosport Centennial Committee, working with the city of Chicago, set a stone with a plaque on Thanksgiving Day, 1995, at the intersection of Cornell and Midway Place Stands. We are now going to see the great-grandson and the grandson of the winner of the first race, J. Frank Duryea. They have unveiled the rock with the plaque on it commemorating the first automobile race in the United States of America. And in 2016, Bill Wildt was down there interviewing everybody. Here's the MG Club, and I had a chance to have a conversation about motorcycle racing with Bill.
Well, as we do every year down here at the Rock, I ended up finishing up with my old friend Dan Schmitt. Dan, tell us who you are, where you're from.
I'm from Chicago. I live in Chicago. I've been in Chicago my entire life, and I do a TV show called Team Chicago Challenge. I should point out that this is 30 years I've been doing the show. I've done 1,328 shows, and mainly 90% is all motorcycle related, motorcycle racing, a lot of motorcycle racing. And then every year I go to Oshkosh and do the EAA. I do 3 shows up there. Great aircraft that should be on everybody's bucket list to get up to the EAA and see some of these great warbirds. And then I also been doing one drag race show with Denny and the Wise Guys. And I've been doing the Corvette show also at Rosemont.
And I can't believe it. I gave him an opening and he forgot to say his name.
Dan Schmitt, S-C-H-M-I-T-T, and on YouTube, if you go to Dan Schmitt Motorcycle Racing, I got about 130 clips up there too.
Great. Dan, you're pretty active on this thing. I used to tease Dan all the time and call him Mr. Chicago because Dan used to run a coffee truck when we were both racing motorcycles back in the early 70s. Dan, what was it? Dan's Coffee Cup, right?
Dan's Coffee Cup, and our good friend Joe Scarlata also had a coffee truck, so me and Joe got to see each other almost every morning for 10 of those 22 years that I was Coffee Dan,
and you saw all, because you were out, it was downtown, and you saw Chicago being built.
Most of the big buildings in Chicago were built during the 1970s and 1980s. Prior to that, the biggest building in Chicago was the Prudential building.
Right, and then they built Hancock?
And they built the Hancock, which was 100 stories, but it's half commercial and half residential. And Standard Oil was built, Sears Tower, so it's been amazing.
It is amazing, and I tease Dan. I always call him Mr. Chicago because, all kidding aside, you're proud of Chicago.
Yeah, I'm proud of Chicago when it used to be the greatest industrial city in the nation. It used to have, in fact, in 1970 there was 400,000 manufacturing jobs in Chicago. We built everything in Chicago, and the statement was, if you couldn't make it in Chicago, you couldn't make it anywhere else. So Chicago was always a very great city.
Yeah, it is. In fact, I know when my family moved to Chicago in 1955, and we came here because my father was looking for work. We're originally from upstate New York, and there just isn't any work there. And he came to Chicago. My grandmother on my mother's side lived in Chicago, so he stopped in Chicago, and he just couldn't believe it. The newspaper ads page after page after page, and in 3 days he had a better job than he had in upstate New York. And moved the whole family to Chicago, and we've been here ever since. And
it was the Germans. Great amount of Germans are the ones that built Chicago, no doubt about it.
Well, it's true. It's I'm forgetting what the percentage was, but back at the turn of the century, this was very heavily German area.
Right. Well, I mean, like we're here behind the Museum of Science and Industry. This was the site of the World's Fair in 1893. And then they came back and built they had the World's Fair again in 1933. And Chicago was the center of everything in this country, and then, but I think they've lost their way in the last few years.
Well, putting that aside, I wouldn't say it's just Chicago. I would say in a way our whole country has, and we could talk about that for hours, and it would be pointless because this is a motorsport show, and what I want to talk about is how you got yourself involved with motorcycle racing. I should tell our audience, if you hadn't seen these shows before, Dan and I kind of met each other out at Sycamore Speedway. Sycamore Speedway is in Sycamore, Illinois, and it happens to have a professional level short track out there. And they raced amateur motorcycle races on Friday nights and stock cars on Saturdays and Sundays. And it really surprised me the first time I went out there. That's a professional level track. It's just every bit as good as Santa Fe was.
Santa Fe, I mean, I look back, I am so blessed that we were there right in the center of motorcycle racing at its greatest point. It was right when the movie On Any Sunday was made. Dave Aldana, Gene Romero,
Lawwell.
Jim Rice, Mert Lawwell, Bart Markle, Gary Nixon. I mean, the names go on, and these were all the greats of motorcycle racing, and we were in right there. You and me were right there, and I'm like,
I out-qualified Mark Brailsford one night. and don't think I've forgotten it, because I haven't.
well, but I want to ask you, what was the key to get you? Because here, all right, this one picture, I'm going to let you copy this. This is you and me, Clark's Motor Speedway, which is Clarksville, Michigan.
I better be in front or I'll never believe it.
This is between Grand Rapids and Lansing, right off of the interstate.
A great track, like a big Santa Fe.
Right. And here's two guys out front. I don't know who they are. I sort of remember them. You're running third place, 43P, and I'm right behind you, 45P. We're both racing Triumphs, so this probably would have been 1974.
I didn't have my XR?
No, you don't.
I had to look close at it.
Yeah, you don't have the XR. So you raced your first junior year. I think your first and second junior year you ran the Triumph.
No, I had the Harley first, but what I wanted was a backup bike, and I bought Roger Crump's Trackmaster Triumph, and that was for a backup bike.
Okay.
And it made me mad because I loved riding the Triumph. I much preferred it to the XR, but I was always faster on the XR, so I had to ride it. Yeah.
So you did buy one of them XRs when they came available?
Brand new
in 1974.
I always, let me tell you the nice story, because you probably know the new name of the place, because it's no longer on. It was Oak Park Harley Davidson. It was on
Roosevelt Road.
On Roosevelt, yeah, it's not there anymore.
Bob Maxim was the
okay.
owner.
And I went there, and they had a brand new 1972 Alloy XR 750 there that I'd been eyeing.
For $2,500.
$2,750.
Okay.
Okay. And so I went there one day in the morning, and I told him I wanted it. And he said, okay. I says, I'll come back. I'm going to work right now. I'll come back after work, and I'll bring you the money. I walked in there later that night, and I had the money with me, and he said, oh boy, am I glad you come in. He says, or I would have committed suicide. I said, why is that? He says, an hour after we left, another guy came in and wanted to give me the money right then and there.
Right.
And he didn't do it.
But he was committed to you.
To me, and I've never forgotten that. I have never forgotten that. I thought that was
when men had honor.
When there was honor, he didn't do it, and I handed him the 2750. But by the way, folks, you wonder why we're talking about that I bought the Alloy XR 750 Harley for $2,750, brand new, a complete motorcycle. Today, just the engine is $50,000. $50,000 just for the engine.
Right.
So,
no,
it's still a competitive motor.
And if Harley Davidson would have continued to make them, the price would still be down.
Right.
For some reason why these companies quit doing things, for whatever the bean counters are saying.
It's bean counters, yeah.
Right. That these engines would still be affordable, and they would still be competitive, and maybe the whole racing thing, but there's bean counters in every corporation that says you can't do that. Well, if it's the bean counters running everything, nothing would get done.
Well, I'll tell you how stupid it gets. I mean, sometimes you would think people with big companies would hire really bright people that had a contribution to make, but I'm thinking about the Thunderbird. Ford Thunderbird came out in 1955, a two-seater sports car, kind of a luxury sports car, but a sports car nonetheless, 2 seats, and they continued it in 56. It was a direct competitor to the Corvette, and then they continued it in 57. And it was a viable, in a way, it was more down to earth.
A little bit of a different style than the Corvette.
Oh, well, quite different, but beautiful, and the Corvette was beautiful.
Right.
But the Corvette was fiberglass, the T-Bird was all steel, and all that, and then they decided to make the Thunderbird a 4-seater. Now, the interesting thing about this is they sold many, many, many more Thunderbird 4-seaters than they ever did 2-seaters, and many more 4-seater Thunderbirds than they ever did Corvettes. However, when they look back through their records, they were stealing their own customers. There was guys that would have bought the Galaxy 500 and they bought the four-seater Thunderbird instead.
Right,
so they
right.
didn't get any more sales out of the thing.
It wasn't gross.
No, and then they lost their masthead. The Corvette, I'm sure the Corvette is not a profitable end of General Motors.
No.
But it's the masthead for General Motors.
And they are committed to it.
Yes, and it's the masthead for General Motors. They've got something special that run-of-the-mill companies don't have.
The new Corvette may be the greatest Corvette ever.
Oh, it is
they're
without a doubt.
expensive.
Oh.
They're $70,000. But for another $30,000, you can make that Corvette as good as any Ferrari, any Maserati.
They won Le Mans 2 or 3 years in a row. I mean, who would have ever thought Corvette, you know?
Right. Oh, no.
And it becomes a symbol of General Motors quality. You don't have to make the profit on those.
Right.
It was a little bit like when Chevy used to make the 409. They sold very few of those. But we had the Beach Boys made a song, She's Real Fine, My 409, and you know, it's become an iconic thing. Even though they sold very few, it caused a lot of conversation about Chevrolet, and the old man bought a Chevy station wagon.
The magic. People seem to forget the magic. It's just like I'm saying Santa Fe. You could do the number counting. You could talk about all the racers. There was a certain magic to that whole motorcycle thing, which now brings me let me get this across so people out there on it. Why did you get in a motorcycle race? What was the initial
cost?
Cost, because you raced cars before.
Right.
Okay.
Right. What happened to me was, quite frankly, I'd always had motorcycles. I had my first one when I was 13 years old. If you'll remember, now you're probably too young. You don't remember when.
You could have a license at 14.
Right. Exactly.
As long as it was under 5
horsepower. Exactly.
Right.
So as soon as I was 14, I got. In fact, it's an interesting story. That's how I got my driver's license. I went to the place on Berwyn. This before they had, you just rode around the regular streets. They didn't have a.
Right.
And I went there, and the guy looks at me. He says, "That's what you're getting a license?" I says, "Yeah." And so he said, "Well, I don't know anything about those." He looks at me, he says, "Well, I'm going to give this guy his test. Just follow me along, I'll look back." So I followed him along.
He's in a car, giving a test, you're following him.
I followed him on a bike. And
so what was your first bike?
Whizzer motorbike.
Oh, yeah, the Whizzer. Okay.
Okay, so I followed him around and all that, and we get back to the thing, and the guy gets out, he says, "Well, it looks like you know what you're doing," and he signs off the license. But so I was doing dirt riding right after I got the DKW right after that from Germany, and I was doing dirt riding with it and all that, and I was always enthused about bikes. But my first race car, my first racing was at Oswego with the bike, but my first professional racing was the stock car. And I got driven out at O'Hare Stadium. I got driven out of stock car racing in 2 years. The cost was just beyond what
even then, the cars were...
Oh, it was as bad as it was today.
So if you wanted to be in the only one that lasted was Santa Fe Speedway. He was still paying a pretty decent purse. You couldn't make any money at it, compared to like a Raceway Park where they had regulated tires and all that. Santa Fe was probably the last place with wide open racing, and that's what you wanted to be in.
Well, I was racing at O'Hare Stadium.
Right, but you wanted to be...
I wanted to be the big guys.
Right.
But not just that. For example, it's no different today. Today, if you wanted an engine for one of those cars, you would go and probably get a Gertie engine out of Indiana. And they're for an all-aluminum, say a 420 or a 430 Gertie, which is basically a small block Chevy, although there's no Chevy parts on it. But you're going to spend $40,000 to $50,000 for it. Well, back when I started stock car racing in '59, it was $5,000 for a Traco Chevy engine, and it came out of California. So that was a year's pay. So it's still a year's pay. No matter how you look at it, it's a year's pay. So it just, the cost was so high, I couldn't believe it. So my friend and I, we were out in Carpentersville. They used to have a place you could ride. I don't know if you remember it or not. Went to Carpentersville, and we're racing around some guy. They had a little short track set up, and these guys saying, "God, you guys are really good. You should go to Sycamore." And we said,
"What's Sycamore?"
"What's Sycamore?" And so they told us about it. It's an amateur track. So we went out there and watched, and boy, my eyes were as big as saucers. Oh, this is for me. And same with Todd. So we both started racing at Sycamore Speedway, and then we're hearing about Santa Fe Speedway. And well, those were the pros.
Well, you had to be a professional.
You had to be a pro, and you had to make enough points, as and all that stuff. But it was a wonderful time. I don't have. If people often ask me, they say you've done both, and you've also done road racing. You've done oval tracks. You've done. What's your favorite? And I say, my favorite is one that's close. This driving for 8 hours, like going to Cape Girardeau, Missouri for a rain out, boy, that's a long haul, And but I like the cars as much as I like the bikes. The bikes, though, my problem with the cars was all I ever wanted was I want as good a piece of equipment as the best guy on the track has. That's all I want. I want a fair shot. Well, I couldn't do it with a car. I couldn't even get close, but with a bike, I
But
could.
you bought a Bultaco.
Yes.
And at that time, what did you pay for that Bultaco? Like $1,000?
Okay, now let's back it up just a little bit,
Okay.
because before I had that, I had a DT1 Yamaha with a Git kit on it. If you remember the Git
Right,
kits,
right,
yeah,
right,
and
right.
that was a smoking bike. That was
Right,
fast,
right,
but
right.
they handled terribly.
Right, right.
And then I bought the Bultaco, and a new Bultaco at that time was $1,400.
Okay, but that was ready to go. You could
Ready to race.
just go to Santa Fe
Right,
Speedway and
right,
you would be
right. It
competitive.
was a race
with that-
bike, yep.
Yeah, race
Yep.
bike, right,
Yep.
right. All right, so let me, real quick, because
Well, before you go away from that one
Okay.
picture, let me just hold that up for a second, take a look at what it is. I didn't even know this existed. I probably won't give it back to him. Yeah, this is pretty cool. I did like Clarksville. It was like a big Santa Fe Speedway. What we're talking about is a lot of tracks are a pea gravel that you can shuffle your foot along, and the gravel will go over the top of your foot. That'd be called a cushion track. And a lot of them were like Santa Fe. You could hit the track with a hammer. It was like hitting asphalt. It was hard clay. And that's how Clarksville was. Clarksville was a hard clay track. And I liked Santa Fe and I liked Clarksville. I always did well there.
Right.
That's a nice picture. I didn't know that existed.
Okay, all right, now, I started Team Chicago
Go ahead.
at Santa Fe Speedway 1977. I got Howard Teeth to come up with an extra $300, and the concept was, because they did this in Michigan, that team sports were big, so maybe we had some kind of team, we could get more people in the grandstand. Even though Santa Fe had a good amount of, they had anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 people on a Wednesday night at a race. So I invited Bill Wildt to join Team Chicago. We put this book together the first year, and there's a picture of Bill here, young Bill Wildt. And then I put together this
Without
program.
a doubt, the best looking guy on the page, by the way.
Yeah, Bill, sure. and then I put this one together, sold some advertising, and we handed this one out at the races.
Now, what do you have to say about your look, Dan? I want you to explain that to me. Explain that look.
That's the Charlie Manson look.
Yeah, that's a good. He once said he wasn't going to get a haircut until he made expert. If that were the case, he'd be down to his knees by now.
No, but I did make expert.
Well, that's the bit. Okay, I'll let that go.
And I did win 2 national championships, Bill.
Okay, we won't ask for records and proof and all that kind of stuff.
No, it's all on there. Anybody who watches my show have seen the shows.
I'm
from
teasing. Dan and I have.
1999
You know how
to
long we've been
2002.
friends? We've been saying 30 years for so long. 40 years snuck up on us.
Oh, yeah.
Do you
No,
realize
I
that?
have been racing motorcycles for 46 years. So we go back to 1970 is 46 years. And like I said, the way I knew nothing about motorcycle racing. I went to Santa Fe Speedway with the guys from A Cycle World one Wednesday night. I thought I was a drag strip or something. I walked in, practice is going on, short track. I'm like, man, I want to do this. And luckily for me, Joe Scarlatta was also interested. So Joe and I both went to Sycamore. That's when we met you. I remember you, at Santa Fe Speedway, Bill, you were a much better racer than I. There's no doubt about it. There was times you won the B program.
I've won a lot of them, yeah.
There was times that you were almost in the A program. Yep. I don't think I never made the A program. Never even close. Made the B program a couple times. On the TT track is where I could do well.
It was, let's face it, we were lucky, and what Dan is talking about, it's so hard to explain to people now, but I don't want it forgotten. Santa Fe was a classy place. When you went to Santa Fe, everybody in the pits had to wear pit whites. If you were allowed into the pits, you had to be wearing white pants.
You had to have a license to go in the pits.
And we had to have white pants and a white shirt. And I'm going to tell you something. It looked so sharp when they rolled out the feature. All the top experts in the country, with all the crews in white, rolling these motorcycles out to be introduced for the feature. Who wouldn't want to be a part of that?
Right,
who wouldn't want to be part of that?
And like I said, from 2,000 to 4,000 people on a Wednesday night, 91st and Wolf Road, there was people that we met just today that would be there every Wednesday night. And then the National, you'd have the TT National in June, you'd have the Short Track National that first week in August.
Okay, well, let me stop you right there, because again, the audience doesn't know what you're talking about. Santa Fe Speedway was essentially a short track, meaning they had a quarter-mile short track, but they had the straightaways extended on each end and another corner further down that they called a half mile. That was used occasionally in motorcycles. It was once every month. They had what they call a classic. A classic.
George Mack Classic,
right.
Pat McHenry Classic.
Pat McHenry Classic.
And the Patriot Classic.
Right, and you would use the longer track for that. But then they had a third track the TT track, and what TT means is Tourist Trophy. And you use the same track, but it has to have at least one right-hand turn and a jump. So they would swing, you would go down the straightaway as normal, go to the turns 1 and 2 as normal, and then you'd have to turn hard down into the infield, come straight towards the spectator stands, make a hard right turn, still inside of the track on the infield, go over the jump, land after the jump, hard right turn, back out onto the track proper and around again. And that was the TT track. And some guys, you know, remember who was really good on the TT? It surprised me.
No.
A standout, Rotable Taco. Keeper.
Oh yeah. Ted Keeper.
Ted Keeper was a
from
good
Milwaukee.
TT rider. Good TT.
Right.
He didn't do much on the short track, but he was a good TT rider.
All I can say about the short track at Santa Fe, it was so intense that if you allowed a thought to come through your mind, four bikes went right by you.
Yeah. No. It was a knife fight. It was a knife fight.
I mean, an 8-lap heat race or 6-lap would drain you.
Yep.
And the 10-lap final would be...
I don't know if I told you, I weighed myself one night, weighed myself going there and weighed myself when I got home, 8 pounds.
You lost?
It lost 8 pounds
just
in one
from
night.
the insanity.
Yeah, it's 8 pounds because when I took my leathers off, they were twice as heavy as when I... It was unbelievable.
Right.
People have no idea.
And it wasn't just how hot it was the whole intensity.
The physical intensity. And it was something you were proud to be part of. Now, was there something else you wanted to talk about there?
The Team Chicago stuff. So I'm going to give you these here, and they got pictures of you.
Yeah, because I want to put the pictures on the thing. I don't want the audience to miss that one.
Right. So we got pictures here, and then the first year here. So you're going to get these. I'm going to let you videotape this here.
I'm going to take this with me so I can scan it. I won't lose it.
Okay. Are you sure?
You might not get it back, but I won't lose it. Like I say, Dan and I have been friends for a long time. Anything else we want to talk about before we close it up for today?
No,
I'm cold enough.
I'm just happy that we're here, that we're still kicking.
We're still alive, because did you hear about Alex Denisenko? Or maybe you didn't know him. Did you know Alex?
No.
He had the drag racing Mustangs, the moneymaker.
Yeah.
I knew him very well and everything. He passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I am too. That's the first I've heard of it. And I understand he passed away in February, and nobody's mentioned it or anything.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we're lucky we're here. Yeah. We're lucky we came through that great era. The rock thing, the beauty of the rock. Not only its first automobile race ever in the United States, but the people that, like the MG guys, they've been here from the beginning, and
the Corvette guys are getting that way too.
And the Corvette guys too.
North Shore Corvette Club.
It's one of these little deals. I mean, if I was mayor of Chicago, I'd have a monument here. I'd have washrooms here. I would be here if I was the mayor.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah. Now, where's Rauner? He's the motorcycle guy.
Who was the one politician that came down here?
Danny Davis.
Danny Davis. Danny Davis come here. Is a nice man, and he was interested in
Danny Davis.
Congressman Danny Davis.
He was interested in
and
what
he was
we were
really
doing.
interested. Yeah, he really was. What I would do if I were the city, this is because it's an important historical site for people involved with motorsports, and you have to understand that NASCAR built a speedway in Joliet, the Chicagoland Speedway. It draws 100,000 spectators every year. If they knew they could just drive a little bit north to Chicago and take their picture with their car by the monument, the rock, that identifies the start and finish of America's first auto race, I would bet 3/4 of them would come up here to get that picture. So what you need here is all of this should be cobblestone around here. All cobblestone where people are encouraged to bring their cars up.
And if someone did it and you put your name on the car, how many people would pay?
Hey, exactly.
So it wouldn't cost taxpayer anything, but because...
No, but think it doesn't go... If you bring... I said 3/4 of people come up here. Let's say 60,000 people. Right. You bring 60. You know how much money they drop off coming up here?
Yes.
They stop and eat. They get gas and everything.
The
museums right down the street. Right. Oh, I mean, it's a natural. And why they haven't picked up? 21 years I've been doing this.
It's just you and me, Bill.
It's just you and me, buddy. So, but that's okay. I don't give up easy, and neither do you.
Right. And now we are traveling to 91st and Wolf Road in Willow Springs, Illinois. This boulder was set here to mark the spot of Santa Fe Speedway. Both Bill and I were invited to speak at this event. But first, we will hear from the historian who wrote this inscription on this boulder, Stan Kalwazinski, and who will be introduced by the mayor of Willow Springs, Al Nowaschek.
Next up, a historian and also the gentleman that is responsible for the historical text behind the memorial boulder here, Stan Kalwazinski. Stan?
Thank you very much, Bear. It's my pleasure to be here today and see all these fans and former competitors here. And Bob Bohanec got a hold of me this past early in the summer and said, we'd like you to help us do this inscription on the back of this Santa Fe Speedway monument. And if you get a chance later, you can take a walk around here. And maybe this is my speech right here in front of me, what we read, or wrote, I should say. But Santa Fe Speedway, 1953 to 1995. And I guess I fancy myself as a racing historian. I can tell you, you know, who won the first championship here at Santa Fe. Kenny Boyer from Indiana won that. And I still can't remember my wife's birthday, but I can tell you Kenny Boyer. And Bill Van Allen, and track champion here many, many times, and Tony Izzo and Jimmy O'Connor and Frank Reber and John Provenzano winning those National Clay Track Championships here for many, many years. And Johnny Kapovich won a 200-lapper here back in 1955. And I know all this stuff. Worthless information, my kids call it. But as far as Santa Fe Speedway and the Chicagoland racing community, I think it's very, very important and a great honor to have this monument here. I mean, when was the last race here held? 1995. It's almost 20 years. And now we have a monument. And this is probably one of the few monuments that mark a racetrack, the presence of a racetrack at one time. I mean, in Chicagoland, this is it, right here, Santa Fe Speedway. A couple of things I just was thinking of during the earlier speeches. How many people remember Jack Brickhouse? He was an announcer here back in 1954. The races were televised on WGN television back then for an hour, hour and a half, whatever it was, I think on Sunday nights. A good friend of mine, Elmer Steinbeck, was a timer and scorer here in the early 50s, 53, 54, 55 time frame. And Elmer Steinbeck was working at 87th Street Speedway, way out there about 87th and Cottage Grove in Chicago. And they said, yeah, we're going to start running at this Santa Fe Park over on 91st and Wolf Road. And Elmer Steinbeck and his buddy, they lived in the north side of Chicago. They said, well, let's go take a ride one Saturday, Sunday, whatever, in the afternoon and go find this 91st and Wolf Road in Santa Fe Park. And they drove out here, and they drove out here, and they drove out here, and they kept driving, and they finally got here to Santa Fe Park. And Howard Teat was part of the promoting group at that time and was, you know, taken after his father, who had started Santa Fe Park, the Picnic Grove area right along the Santa Fe railroad tracks here. One other thing that as far as my coming out here in 1966, same thing, south side of Chicago guy and young guy, and go out here with my dad, and we drive out here. I thought we were going to Iowa or Wisconsin that day. Kind of a trip way back when. But I always thought that the racers, all the racers, no matter if they were the top guys, the track champions, whatever, or the guy that ran the sportsman division or whatever, the lightning rods. When I was a kid, I always thought those guys were bigger than, I don't know, Michael Jordan. They were just big-time racers and heroes, at least to me. And one other thing in closing, how many remember the old WLS jingle, the Santa Fe Speedway? There's only one speedway, it's a track of clay. You ain't seen nothing till you've been to Santa Fe. Racing on a track of clay. Thank you very much.
Wow, to actually have some song out here this afternoon, that's great. Next, I'd like to ask up Bill Wildt. Bill would like to give a little background to the motorcycle racing end of the track for many years. Bill?
Mayor Nowaschek caught Bill by surprise as he was doing the camera work that day. He quickly locked the camera down and proceeded to the podium.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, the thing that's really interesting about Santa Fe Speedway, well, several things that are really interesting. First of all, there were 3 tracks here. We had the short track, the long track, which incidentally, everybody calls a half mile, but it wasn't quite a half mile. And for the motorcycle guys, it was important because the AMA required a track to be a full half mile before you could run the 750s on it. So when they ran the short track, of course, they ran the 250 two-strokes, and when they ran the long track, they ran the 250 two-strokes. But we also had a TT course. A TT course is a tourist trophy event. It's named after the Isle of Man TT on the Isle of Man. And it requires left and right turns and at least one jump. And Santa Fe Speedway accommodated the infield. You used the big part of the big track, and as you came out of turn 2, instead of going down the back straightaway, you turned into the infield, ran over the jump, turned right, went back out into the big track, and came around again. So there were 3 different disciplines here at Santa Fe Speedway that I kind of thought was particularly interesting. Now, there are at least half of the crowd out here that doesn't have a guess what I'm talking about. And the reason for that is because Santa Fe Speedway actually had 2 communities. There were the motorcycle people and the stock car people. Now, I am willing to bet you, of all the motorcycle people out here, how many of you never attended more than 1 or 2 stock car races? Raise your hands. Yeah, only a couple guys attended. And of all the stock car people out here, how many of you attended more than 1 or 2 motorcycle races? Okay, we got a couple more hands there. Good. The point that I'm trying to make is that in order to present Santa Fe Speedway properly, what we really have to do is have 2 programs. That's why we've got the stock cars on my right, I guess that would be the audience's left, and we've got the motorcycles on the audience's right or my left. And we've got guests up on the platform that speak for the motorcycle group and guests that speak for the stock car group. So in any event, I wanted to make that point before they went any further, so everyone here understand it. There's 2 distinct communities. Not that some of them didn't, it's not that they didn't like each other, it's just that motorcycle racers, they race here every Wednesday night. But then they'd be in Granite City on Tuesday night, they'd be in Danville on Thursday night, they'd be all over the Midwest on Saturday and Sunday, so their schedules didn't allow them to come to stock car races. And similarly with the stock car guys, they were working building their cars for the weekend and couldn't come out on a Wednesday night. It wasn't they didn't like each other, it's just 2 separate communities, and I think we should kind of make that clear before we bring up some of the motorcycle guys. So that's all I have to contribute to the program, and I can contribute one other thing. Mayor, step in here. You see the camera? You see that light there? The blinking one?
Yes.
Tells me I got to change tapes. So give me 1 minute. Okay. Thank you, folks.
Now let's jump back to 1987. Grattan Raceway, located outside of Grand Rapids, Michigan. Motorcycle road racing and the Michigan Grand Prix.
Hi, I'm going to interrupt you girls to do this interview for a minute because it's going to get real complicated here. First of all, your name, sir?
Brett Cicchini.
Brett, how'd you do?
I did all right.
Now, come on, you got to do better now. How'd you do?
I did good.
Okay, listen, we got you over here especially for a couple of reasons. Number one, you took and had our friend Dan Schmitt at the other end there wear a camera on his helmet, or actually maybe this is your helmet that you've mounted the camera to?
Yeah, it's our old helmet.
And you loaned it to Dan, and Dan took and actually ran a race with it.
Right. Yeah, filming the other bikes.
Okay, did you build this arrangement?
Yeah, we put it together.
Why?
Mostly for my father can follow me, and then we can go back and look at it and see what we do wrong and what we do right.
Okay, so you do it sort of as an instructive tool in order to correct riding technique errors and things like that?
That's exactly what we use it for.
And it's sort of instantaneous. You can go back to the van with it and replay it right away because it's on videotape?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Dan, did it help you at all?
Well, I was out here about a month ago or 2 months ago, and they were both out here on a Saturday, a practice day, and they had the camera, and it's great. I mean, someone follows you, you can see what lines you're using. Then Brent's already used it in a race a couple of times. I remember one time at Blackhawk he was following Ed Key. Now you get to find Ed Key's magic lines. So it really helps you as far as what you're doing wrong, what you're doing right. You can see where you're going too wide in corners, and I think it's a magnificent tool.
Yeah, I think you're right, Dan, and I should have probably introduced you to our audience. This is Dan Schmitt. Of course, our audience really should be familiar with you, Dan. We've done an interview with you before and shown some of your footage. We should also say that you're a Chicago Access producer and have your own show called The Other Side, correct?
Right. During the summer, I'm in. I took a vacation from the video show, but as soon as it gets a little cooler out and we're not racing, I'll have more time and I'll be back on the air, at least on a monthly show.
Right. As we found out in the studio interview we did, you're involved with trying to help the WERA thing draw spectators, and which is sort of a new angle for amateur motorcycle road racing.
Well, the bottom line with racing is the insurance keeps increasing. So are we going to keep raising the entry fee for the competitors, or if you get a few spectators, say if the insurance goes up $500 a year, instead of making all the riders pay an extra $10 entry fee, if we got 50 spectators, that would cover, and we wouldn't have to keep raising the entry fees. See, to make racing more affordable, I don't think the entry fee should be so high, and because it is a spectacular show, people should know about it. You know, I can give you an example, if you want. Can I talk about the power of TV?
You sure can, Danny. You know it's my favorite subject. Go ahead.
Well, yesterday we went into Grand Rapids, WZZM, the ABC affiliate, and did a little minute-and-a-half clip that was on the 11 o'clock news. Well, when we came in there and people started rolling in, guys on bikes and some old guy up on the hill, they seen it on the news, didn't know Grattan existed, and came out here. So just that minute-and-a-half really made the difference on bringing another 200 people into the race today.
And now Bill Wildt has jumped in a Corvette, and we're going to take a couple laps around this 2-mile road course, Grattan Raceway, with a great group of riders showing the fast way around.
This is Dan Schmitt leading the Cicchini helmet camera out for part of this demonstration. They're meeting us halfway around the track. Notice to the right, that's Brett Cicchini and Dan Schmitt. We've got to thank Dan Schmitt for helping us all day, including organizing this, and of course Brett Cicchini and his dad. This is a fabulous device, this helmet camera that they use.
Girls, and again, a long day at Grattan. Nice to be here again, huh, Christine?
Yes, it really is nice here.
Jolie, first time for you at Grattan. What do you think?
It's pretty nice. I mean, it's funny watching all these people just, I mean, they don't look like they're going that fast until they go down the straightaway. Then it gets like really fast.
You said you wanted one of these bikes?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
All right, listen, behind us, girls, we've got some crazies that we continually try to show our audience motorsports. And as you guys know that participate in motorsports, it's a real tough job to do. It's something you have to, it's a visceral stimulation and something you really have to feel and experience to have an appreciation for it. And I don't know if we're going to have very many people in the public that are going to do 170 down the straightaway here and pitch into the corner. So these guys said, Bill, we've got a guy here with a Corvette. Why don't you take your camera and ride around with him, and we'll follow around, and then we'll pass, and you can take all kinds of pictures. Well, you guys did it, and I got the pictures, and we don't know what they look like yet, but I hope I got something other than the deck, the clouds, the deck, the trees, the clouds, you know, like that. Say what, Dave?
I came by you down here, and he was turning, making a left-hand turn. You were flying out the side of the car. It's pretty funny.
I was on the way.
Enjoying yourself.
What's your name, Dave? Your full name?
Dave Barnard.
Dave, where are you from?
Chicago, Illinois, north side.
Is that right? Whereabouts?
Damon and Irving.
Oh, sure, real near my old neighborhood. How'd you do out here today?
I did okay. Took first and second in the heats yesterday. Got a bad start today in the minor race. Ended up with a fifth. And I was second in B Superbike, crashed out, picked it up, and finished with a fourth.
Well, that's certainly impressive.
And now Chris Schultz is going to interview Scott Zampak, who is leading in the points at this part of the season, the Michigan Grand Prix Championship.
Full name.
My name is Scott Zampak. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
And what kind of a bike do you have?
Well, I was riding two Suzukis today, a 750 and 1100.
How come two?
Well, you need it to be available for the money classes. You need both size bikes to ride in the class.
How did you do today?
Well, I did pretty good. I took 2 seconds in the money races, but I won the Michigan Grand Prix for the 6th straight race in a row, so.
Congratulations, that's terrific.
Yeah, that's great. One more left. All I have to do is keep going.
Are you also going to be at St. Louis and Black Hawk Farm?
Yeah, I'm going to go down to St. Louis. We have some real good friends, Mark Oldham and Dennis Martin down there, and that's their home track, so we're going to come down and race with them.
Do you follow the whole WERA circuit throughout the year?
Well, mostly in our region. It's real tough to travel the whole circuit, which is a real large part of the country, you know, and work, so you can't do both.
Well, how are you doing in the point standings?
I'm doing real well. I'm leading the Suzuki Series, I believe, in both classes in our region, so I'm looking forward to the Grand National in California. It should be real exciting.
Oh, I imagine. That's terrific. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris and Scott. And now we're looking at the War Bike. This is a motorcycle that Bill Wildt built to promote the motorsport advancement crusade and also to have a motorcycle that could run with the top fuel cars at that time. In 1980, the top fuel cars turned 620 and went 220 miles per hour. The Motorsport Advancement Crusade was created to promote motorsports, all forms of motorsports. And I want to keep the War Bike in Chicagoland, so if you have any talent raising money, if you know anything about GoFundMe, please contact me at teamdan45@gmail.com. And I'd love to hear from my audience, so if you have a comment about these specials or any of my TV shows, go to teamdan45@gmail.com. This War Bike with its twin Turbonique rockets produces 6,000 horsepower, and it is priceless. Music for the show by Mike Preetz. If you take a look at the War Bike, it is a priceless piece of engineering, and some of the drawings that Bill was showing people to come up with a proper paint scheme. And all of this is available to be put in a worthy museum.